In our lives today, the decisions we make carry the potential for both temporary and lasting effects. Every choice we face has the power to shape our future. It is essential to consider the consequences of our actions, weighing short term gains against long term impacts. By making thoughtful, intentional decisions, we can navigate the tension between instant gratification and long term fulfillment. Recognizing the significance of our choices empowers us to prioritize values, align our actions with our goals, and embrace a future that is shaped by wisdom, discernment, and purpose. In today's session, we will look at the end of the first patriarch's life and see the continuing lives of the next two patriarchs, Isaac and Jacob. I'm Dr. Ray, and welcome to this week's Hosea International Speaks. Chapter 25 of Genesis takes on some significant events in the beginnings of the nation of Israel, though it would not be fully established under that name for at least another 500 to 600 years. Abraham would live to be 75 more years after the birth of Isaac. Isaac would then live to be about 180 years old. And we can see that in Genesis chapter 35 and verse 28. And Jacob would end up his life in Egypt. And he would probably be around the age of 147. His name had already been changed to Israel at this time. And his nation, which would be about 75 strong, would end up in Egypt and sojourn there for about 430 years before returning back to the land of their inheritance with some about 1 million plus people. They would then conquer the land that would be their inheritance, which would take about another 5 years, in which God would give the land rest, in which he can now say Yahweh, through his people, establish the nation of Israel. Notice the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, had to go through a refining process before Yahweh could establish a people for himself. Let's look at Genesis a little closer, chapter 25, which provides a detailed account of significant events in the lives of Abraham, which is coming now to the end of his life, Isaac, and Jacob. The chapter can be broken down into somewhat this manner: another marriage, verses 1 through 11, death and burial of Abraham. What happens is Abraham takes another wife, Keturah, and has children with her. But Isaac remains still the primary heir of the covenant. Abraham might have been somewhere between 140 and 150 years old when he marries for the third time, Sarah being his first, Hagar the second, and now Keturah. Now note, when the children of Keturah were old enough, Abraham sent them away with gifts, and he sent them, I want you to know the direction he sent them in. He sent them eastward. It is my belief that these would be the ancestors of the Magi, or the kings that would visit Jesus at his birth, or some 2 years after his birth, in the city of Jerusalem. If we read the birth of Jesus, we come upon the scripture which now says, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men," other translations say Magi's, "came from the east to Jerusalem, where Jesus was now residing, about the age of 2 years old." I want you to notice they came from the east, saying, "Who or where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star," notice the direction again, "in the east, and we have come to worship him." You can see that in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. I believe that the gifts they brought with them were the gifts Abraham gave to the sons of Keturah which had increased from the time of Abraham until the time of Christ, who would now be 2 years old. In other words, the gifts received would have multiplied because they would have put the gifts to work for them, and they would have increased in their wealth, which is a scriptural basis. Where do we see this in scripture, that the wise men would be the same as mentioned in chapter 2 of Matthew? Let's go back to Genesis chapter 17, which says, I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you. Well, we can see that nations, plural, there was the nation of Ishmael and Isaac. And then he says, and kings shall come from you. Now remember, we can only surmise that these were from the same lineage of Abraham through Keturah. And that means also David was in that line of the kings. But then also we see that these came from the east, in which Abraham again sent Keturah's son. Now, at the death of Abraham, who dies at the good old age of 175 years old, he is now buried in the cave of Machpelah alongside his wife Sarah. This highlights the fulfillment of Yahweh's promises to Abraham, the passing of the patriarchal torch to Isaac, and the importance of honoring and preserving family heritage. The second highlight of this chapter, we see the descendants of Ishmael, verses 12 through 18, whom Yahweh would also make a nation according to his promise to Abraham. This also completes the fourth section of the division of Genesis called Chaye Sarah, or the death of Sarah, and it brings us to the fifth division. Now, Ishmael's lineage is listed, showcasing the fulfillment of God's promise to make him a great nation, and we can see that in chapter 21, verse 13. This also reminds us of Yahweh's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises, even to those outside the chosen line, and emphasizes his sovereignty over all peoples. Now, like I said, this brings us to the fifth division, Toledot, in the English meaning generations. And this begins the generations of Isaac. The birth of Esau and Jacob are highlighted in the verses, chapter 25, verses 19 through 26. Isaac and Rebekah have twin sons, Esau and Jacob, fraternal twins, not identical, who are distinctly different in appearance and in personality. The birth of these sons sets the stage for future conflict and the development of the chosen line through Jacob. This highlights the complexities of family dynamics, the uniqueness of each individual, and the ways in which Yahweh's purposes unfold through ordinary human lives. We notice in this chapter also, Esau is driven by his immediate desires and cravings, thereby selling his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of stew. This story also serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of prioritizing temporal desires over long-term blessings and the importance of wise decision-making. In verses 23 to 26, the covenant continues with Jacob. The Lord affirms to Rebekah that the older son, which is Esau, will serve the younger, which is Jacob. This reiterates the divine choice and establishes Jacob as the heir of the covenant promises given to Abraham and to Isaac. This also highlights Yahweh's sovereignty in choosing his instruments for his redemptive purposes, even when it goes against cultural expectations. Now, what significance does this chapter have for us today? First of all, chapter 25 reminds us of the importance of honoring family heritage and recognizing the faithfulness of Yahweh in fulfilling his promises. It emphasizes the complexities of human relationships and the potential consequences of impulsive decisions. The chapter also highlights divine sovereignty in choosing unlikely individuals for his purposes, encouraging us to always put our trust in Yahweh's plan for our lives. It prompts us to reflect on the legacies we inherit and the choices we make, considering their long-term impact on ourselves and future generations. Ultimately, it reminds us that Yahweh's covenant and redemptive plan continue to unfold through ordinary human lives, and that we can trust in his guidance and faithfulness for today. In summary, Genesis chapter 25 provides insight into the passing of Abraham, the lineage of Ishmael, and the birth of Esau and Jacob, and the consequences of Esau's impulsive action. It's significant for our lives today in reminding us of Yahweh's faithfulness, the importance of wise decision-making, and the ongoing unfolding of Yahweh's covenant and the redemptive plan through ordinary individuals. Well, if this session has helped you out in any way in coming to know Yahweh in a greater measure, even for your life, go ahead and hit the like button, which is probably right about there. And if you wish to be notified, and the next time we go live, you can go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Or if you want to, you can write me at hoseainternational@yahoo.com or hoseaintspeaks@gmail.com. And if you wish to give, go ahead and scan your phone and just go ahead and scan the QR code somewhere up there, and you will be given to Hosea International. Or you can go to Venmo at hoseaint. I'm Dr. Ray, and I'll see you next week on Hosea International Speaks.